Kenny Ackerman finding young Levi starving next to his dead mother changed everything. That moment created humanity's strongest soldier. Without Kenny's training in combat and survival, Levi never becomes the warrior who single-handedly turns impossible battles into victories. But what if Kenny never searched for his sister that day? Today, we're exploring what if Kenny never raised Levi, and how one man's absence dooms humanity to extinction. Keep watching to see how the Battle of Shiganshina becomes an unwinnable massacre without Levi's help. Without Kenny finding and raising him, young Levi either dies within days in the underground, or he survives as a completely different person, weak, broken, and totally irrelevant to humanity's fight against the Titans. This single change doesn't just affect Levi's story, it basically dooms humanity. Let me give you the background on how things actually went down in the original timeline. Kenny Ackerman was specifically looking for his sister Kuchel when he found her dead in a filthy room in the underground. Young Levi had been sitting there alone next to his mother's corpse for several days. The kid was starving, barely alive, and had no idea what to do. Kenny took him in, and honestly, that decision changed everything. He raised Levi for several years, fans estimate, until the kid was around 12 years old, and during that time, Kenny taught him skills that most people in the underground never learn. We're talking knife fighting, actual combat techniques that could kill a grown man, how to negotiate and intimidate people in the criminal world, and most importantly, how to survive when everyone around you wants you dead or is just looking out for themselves. Kenny also helped Levi access something way more valuable: his Ackerman abilities. There's this moment that gets mentioned where young Levi got into a fight with some merchants over his dead mother's tea set. These guys were beating him badly and threatened to kill him, and that's when his Ackerman powers awakened. He killed all of them. That's the thing about Ackermans. They have this genetic ability that gives them superhuman strength, speed, and combat instincts, but it needs a trigger. Usually a life-threatening situation. Kenny's training gave Levi the foundation to actually use these abilities once they manifested, instead of just having random bursts of power he couldn't control. Eventually, Kenny abandoned Levi. He just left one day without explanation, and Levi spent years thinking he wasn't good enough, that he'd somehow failed to meet Kenny's expectations. The truth was way more complicated. Kenny left because he felt like garbage about himself. He was a serial killer known as Kenny the Ripper, and he genuinely believed he wasn't fit to be anyone's father figure. But by the time he left, Levi could handle himself. The kid was already a legitimate threat to anyone in the underground. After Kenny left, Levi formed a criminal crew with two people named Furlan and Isabel. Furlan was already a gang leader in the underground, but when he heard about Levi's reputation, he sent thugs to test him. Levi destroyed them single-handedly. Furlan was so impressed he decided to team up with Levi instead of trying to recruit him into his own gang. That tells you everything about Levi's skill level. Even other criminals recognized he was on a different level. Isabel joined them later, and together, they became one of the most effective crews in the underground. They illegally got their hands on ODM gear, the equipment that soldiers use to fight Titans, and taught themselves how to use it. Levi mastered it so completely that he moved faster and more precisely than trained soldiers who'd been using the gear for years. This is what caught Erwin Smith's attention. Erwin was the commander of the Survey Corps, and he was brilliant at spotting talent and potential assets. He found out about Levi and his crew operating in the underground with ODM skills that rivaled his best soldiers. But Erwin also had a strategic reason for going after Levi. He knew that a corrupt nobleman named Lovov had hired Levi's group to assassinate him. Erwin, being the tactical genius he was, decided to keep his enemies close. He captured Levi, Furlan, and Isabel, and gave them a choice: join the Survey Corps or get turned over to the military police, who would probably execute them. They joined, obviously. During their first expedition outside the walls, Furlan and Isabel were killed by Titans. Levi wanted revenge against Erwin, blaming him for their deaths. But Erwin challenged that thinking and showed Levi a bigger purpose. From that point on, Levi became Erwin's most loyal soldier, and eventually, humanity's strongest fighter. Now, let's talk about what happens if Kenny never shows up. We need to be realistic here about what the underground actually is. The anime shows it pretty clearly. It's a nightmare world underneath the real cities, where the poor and criminals live. There's barely any light. Resources are scarce. Violence is constant. And people die every day from starvation, disease, or getting killed over nothing. Children die all the time down there because they can't defend themselves and nobody cares enough to help them. It's survival of the fittest in the most brutal sense. Young Levi is sitting in a room with his dead mother's body. He's malnourished, weak, and has zero survival skills. He doesn't know how to fight. He doesn't know how to steal food without getting caught. He doesn't know which areas are controlled by which gangs or how to avoid the most dangerous people. The most likely outcome is he dies within days, maybe a week at most. He either starves to death right there in that room, or he ventures out looking for food and gets killed by thugs who see an easy target. The underground doesn't have much mercy for helpless kids. Let's say, by some miracle, Levi survives those first few days. Maybe he finds some scraps of food. Maybe he hides in abandoned areas and avoids people. He's still growing up in the worst possible conditions without any guidance. He'd have to figure out survival on his own. And honestly, the odds are stacked completely against him. He might try petty theft, grabbing food when vendors aren't looking, but without training, he'd probably get caught and beaten. He might beg, but beggars in the underground don't exactly thrive. He could try joining a gang for protection, but why would any gang want a weak, untrained kid? At best, he becomes someone's errand boy, doing the dirty work for scraps. Here's the really tragic part about this scenario. Levi still has Ackerman genes. That superhuman potential is still buried inside him, waiting for the right trigger. But without Kenny's guidance, even if his powers do awaken during some desperate moment, what good does it do? Let's say he gets cornered by thugs, and his Ackerman abilities suddenly activate. He gets this burst of strength and speed, manages to fight them off or escape. Then what? He has no idea what just happened to him. He doesn't understand how to control it or make it happen again. It might just be a one-time thing in his mind, this weird moment of adrenaline he can't explain. Or maybe the awakening never happens at all, because he's so beaten down and scared that he avoids any confrontation that could trigger it. He becomes someone who runs and hides instead of fights. The kid who should have become humanity's strongest soldier, the man who could take down dozens of Titans solo, who could match the Beast Titan in combat, who could change the outcome of entire battles by himself, instead becomes just another forgotten casualty. Maybe he dies at age 8 from disease. Maybe he makes it to his teens but he's disabled from a beating that went too far, walking with a limp and missing an eye. Maybe he's alive but so broken mentally from years of abuse and trauma that he's barely functional. In every version of this scenario where Kenny doesn't find him, Levi either dies young or becomes irrelevant. And the really messed up part? Nobody would ever know what was lost. There'd be no memorial for the greatest soldier humanity never had. Just another dead kid in the underground that nobody cared about. If you're enjoying the video so far, subscribe to our channel. This is where everything falls apart. We need to look at two different paths here, depending on whether Levi even makes it past childhood without Kenny. The first path is the most realistic one. Levi just dies. A malnourished kid alone in the underground with no survival skills doesn't make it. He either starves in that room with his mother, gets killed by thugs looking for valuables, or catches disease from the filthy conditions. His death is completely anonymous. Just another statistic in a place where kids die every day. Humanity never learns his name. Erwin Smith never encounters him because there's nothing remarkable about this dead child. The Ackerman bloodline's potential just goes to waste. The second path is if Levi somehow survives to adolescence, but he'd be a completely different person in terrible shape. Without Kenny's combat training, he's getting into fights he's not prepared for. Maybe he loses an eye to some thug. Maybe he's got a permanent limp from a beating where someone broke his leg and it never healed right. He survives through avoidance and cunning instead of strength, pickpocketing, running errands for gangs in exchange for scraps, staying invisible. When Erwin's expedition goes to the underground, this version of Levi is nobody special. The famous recruitment scene never happens because there's nothing about this broken young man that would make Erwin look twice. Even if his Ackerman powers awakened during some desperate moment, he wouldn't know what to do with it. Without Kenny's guidance, he'd just have random bursts of superhuman strength he can't understand or control. The power that should have made him humanity's strongest soldier instead just confuses and scares him. Now, let's talk about how major story arcs change. The Uprising arc becomes emotionally empty. In the original timeline, when Rod Rice kidnaps Eren and Historia, Kenny shows up leading the anti-personnel control squad. The emotional core of that arc is the relationship between Kenny and Levi, two Ackermans on opposite sides with deep history. Every confrontation between them is loaded with unspoken feelings and unresolved trauma. But if Kenny never raised Levi, that's all gone. They're either strangers or never meet. Kenny's still working for Rod Rice to steal the Founding Titan's power, but without Levi in his past, there's no personal stakes. Just another battle with no emotional weight. The immediate aftermath of Levi not existing hits the Survey Corps during critical moments. During the Female Titan arc, when Annie has Eren in her grasp, who saves him? In the original story, Levi's assault completely overwhelmed the Female Titan, forcing her to abandon her objective. Without Levi, Annie probably succeeds and delivers Eren to Marley. Game over for humanity. Even if the mission somehow continues, casualties are way worse. The Battle of Shiganshina is where humanity's fate gets sealed without Levi. The Beast Titan is throwing boulders that are decimating the Survey Corps. Erwin makes that desperate suicide charge to distract Zeke, and it only works because Levi capitalizes on the opening. Levi's solo assault, where he tears through dozens of Titans and rips Zeke from his Titan form, is what wins the battle. Nobody else could have done that. Without Levi, Erwin's sacrifice means nothing. The entire Survey Corps gets wiped out by Zeke's continued bombardment. Eren, Armin, Mikasa, everyone dies. The mission to reach the basement and discover the truth fails completely. Kenny's death scene becomes completely hollow. In the original timeline, Kenny confesses he's Levi's uncle, explains he left because he felt unworthy to be a father, and gives Levi the Titan serum as his last act of love. It's this moment of family reconciliation. Without having raised Levi, Kenny just dies as another villain with no emotional resolution. And critically, that Titan serum doesn't get passed to Levi. After the Battle of Shiganshina originally, both Erwin and Armin are dying. Levi has Kenny's serum and must choose who to save. He chooses Armin, and that decision shapes everything after. Armin's intelligence and colossal Titan power become crucial later. Without Kenny giving Levi that serum, this choice never happens. Either both die, or someone else makes a completely different decision. The entire trajectory changes. The long-term repercussions are catastrophic. Without Levi, survival chances drop to almost nothing. Every major battle becomes significantly harder or impossible. The power dynamics within the military shift completely. Mike Zacharias becomes the top fighter by default, but he died early to the Beast Titan, and even at his peak, he wasn't close to Levi's level. The final battle against the Rumbling loses a critical element. Even after Levi got severely injured by Zeke's Thunder Spear trap, his final act of killing Zeke was key to stopping the Rumbling. Without Levi, Zeke survives longer, the Rumbling continues, and way more people die. The Alliance loses one of their strongest fighters. Kenny's character development gets completely lost. In the original story, raising Levi humanized Kenny, showing he was capable of something beyond being a serial killer. His relationship with Levi added layers, this self-hating man, who didn't think he deserved to be a father, who left when he thought the kid could survive, who in his final moments wanted Levi to understand the truth. Without raising Levi, Kenny stays one-dimensional, just a villain who wants power and dies without depth. The themes about family, abandonment, and legacy disappear. The Ackerman subplot becomes barely explored. Levi was our main window into understanding what it means to be an Ackerman, their combat abilities, immunity to memory manipulation, complicated history with the government. Mikasa provides some of this, but Levi gave way more depth. Without him, that entire dimension gets barely touched. What we're left with is a significantly darker version of Attack on Titan. Humanity probably goes extinct, The truths in Aaron's basement never get discovered. The cycle of hatred between Eldians and everyone else never gets any chance of being broken because nobody survives long enough to try. All because Kenny Ackerman never found a starving kid next to his sister's body. One moment of Kenny searching for Kuchel and finding Levi, that single moment, determines whether humanity has any hope at all. Without it, the world falls apart. The strongest soldier humanity ever had dies alone in the dark before anyone knows his name, and everyone else follows him into extinction shortly after. If you enjoyed our video today, subscribe to our channel.